Hi guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to make these witch hat pencil toppers, and you're going to need a total of 57 bands, and you can make it whatever color you want. So let's get started. Let's start with the hat. We're taking a single, twist, double, and looping it from one peg, twist in the center, creating an X to the other one. And let's repeat it for 6 bands. Single, twist, double. So that's row number 1. Row 2, we're just going to take a single band, and this will be the rim of your hat, so you can use whatever color you want. Taking that single band and looping it around our 6 pegs. Now we're going to loop the bottom 4 bands up and over to the center, reaching from the outside and looping it into the center of our loom for all 6 pegs. And we want to be left with 2 loops per peg for all 6 pegs. Push down after each row. So that was row number 2. Rows 3 and 4, we're taking 6 black bands to cover our 6 pegs for each row, and looping the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. So go under, grabbing the bottom 2 bands, loop up and over to the center, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Push it down. Let's reduce. We're going to pull a single band off the first side peg that's attached to the second and moving it to the first. So pulling the top loop off and check to make sure it's attached to the second. So I'm moving it to the first center peg and then moving the 2 loops off of the side second to the first. So now this has 3 loops and this has 3. Let's work on this side. We're going to grab a single loop off of the side second that's attached to the center third and moving it to the right first peg. So reaching in, grabbing the top single loop, and I see it's attached to the first side peg, so I'm going to put it aside, grabbing the second loop, and it's attached to the third, so I'm moving it to the first side peg, and then reattaching the one we took off back onto the second side peg. So that's what yours should look like. This has 3 loops, and we're going to move these 2 loops off of the center third to add it to the side second peg. So now this has 3 loops, and they all have 3 loops on each peg. Row 5, we're taking 4 single black bands to cover our 4 pegs, then looping the bottom 3 bands up and over to the center. And we want to be left with 2 loops per peg. Push it down. Row number 6, we're going to take 2 single bands and we're going to cover all 4 pegs like that, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center, leaving us with 2 loops left per peg. Push it down. Row number 7 is our last row, taking a single band to cover our 4 pegs, then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving us with only a single loop left on each peg. Now grab all the loops off of each of the 4 pegs and getting it onto a hook. So there's our witch hat so far. Take a single band and getting all 4 loops off of the hook and onto that single band and tie a slip knot. So there's our witch hat so far, and if you want we can tuck in this charm string. Now for the rim of the hat, we're going to be using the hook and some bands. So on the rim of our hat, we're going to grab 2 loops onto a hook like that, taking a single band, and we're going to pull the 2 loops off of the hook and onto that single band and getting it onto a hook, taking another single band and pulling the 2 loops off of the hook and onto that single band. And we're going to need a total of 25 bands to make the rim. We're going to go once again in the same loop. So that's what it should look like. Putting the hook through the same loop off the rim of our hat, getting the 2 loops onto a hook, taking another single band and pulling the 2 front loops off of the hook and onto that single band. And now we have 4 loops on a hook. Taking a single band and pulling all 4 loops off of the hook and onto that single band and getting the 2 loops on a hook. And we're going to do that around the rim of our hat, adding 4 bands per loop. So the first set, we're grabbing the bottom 2 loops onto a hook for the next loop around the rim of our hat. So taking a hook, going to the next rim, grabbing 2 loops onto a hook and grabbing and getting your single band and pulling the two front loops off of the hook and onto that single band and getting it onto a hook, leaving us with 4 loops. Taking a single band and getting the 4 loops off of the hook and onto that single band and getting it onto a hook. Going back to the same loop, so go in, getting the loops onto our hook, grabbing our single band and pulling the loops off of the hook and onto the single band and leaving us with 4 loops. Grabbing our next single band and pulling all 4 loops off of the hook and onto that single band. And now we're going to continue to the next loop, taking our hook, grabbing the 2 bottom loops and getting it onto a hook, taking your next single band and just repeating the same pattern, grabbing the single band, getting the 2 front loops off of the hook and onto that single band, leaving us with 4 loops, taking another single band and pulling all 4 loops off of the hook and onto that single band and leaving us with 2 loops on the hook, taking our hook, putting it through the same loop, getting the 2 bands off of the rim onto a hook, and it's the same one, so this is our second one for this loop on the rim of our hat, and just repeating the same process. So the rim of our hat is starting to form, and remember you should have 2 sets per loop around our hat, and I have 2 more left to go, so I'm just going to repeat the same process. I finished my second set, going to my next loop on the rim of my hat, grabbing the 2 loops and just repeating the same process. So that was my last band and my second set for the loop around the rim. So that was my last band, and I'm going to attach it to the side where we started from. So there's the first loop, the second, so I'm putting a hook through the second loop off of the rim, to connect it, taking our single band and pulling all 4 loops off of the hook and onto that single band, and then tying a slip knot. So there's our witch hat, and let's tuck in that slip knot band. So there's our witch hat toppers. I hope you like them. Thanks for watching.